You ready to take our audience questions?
Absolutely.
All right, let's start over here. Jason.
I wanted you to ask you about kids growing up in circumstances that you grew up in today, in the ghetto in particular.
Yes.
What's missing? Are there not enough adults with that sort of mindset? Is it a leadership failure? Is it a breakdown of the family? What's the problem?
A combination of the things that you mentioned. There's a great family breakdown. For instance, when you look at the African American community, 70% of the babies are born out of wedlock. Now, you're not supposed to talk about that because all family situations are supposed to be equal these days, right? But they're not equal. That father is very much needed, and producing the right kinds of role models for the children and giving them a value system. Because if you don't provide them with a value system at home, they're going to find it somewhere else, and it may not be a good value system. You combine that with the fact that when they go to school, in many cases, they're surrounded by a bunch of politically correct people who begin to indoctrinate them in something other than the can-do attitude, and we got a problem.
Dr. Siegel?
You know, Dr. Carson, I'm not surprised that a doctor like you, who's a top pediatric neurosurgeon, who literally has the brains of children in his hands, personal responsibility would be your first and foremost idea. And taking that theme further, I wonder, you started talking about health savings accounts and skin in the game. How do you feel about this idea that if patients knew what they were buying, knew what they were getting, how much a CAT scan cost, how much an MRI cost? Instead, we have a system where all of this feeds together with physicians who are afraid of malpractice, afraid of being sued. So many tests are ordered unnecessarily. Yes. On the patient side, they don't know what they're getting. On the doctor side, they're afraid of not ordering it. What do you have to say about that?
Well, first of all, I would say that you look at all the countries in the world, we're the ones who have the big problem with malpractice. So what is it that's here that isn't everywhere else? The Trial Lawyers Association. Okay, special interest groups. Anything in our society almost that comes out of Washington that doesn't make sense is attached to a special interest group. They've become, as I alluded to in the speech, the fourth branch of government. Until we deal with that, we're going to keep doing things that don't make sense.
Deneen?
Well, Dr. Carson, I want to thank you for your leadership. But you do know that the black liberal establishment is not going to be happy with you. And I'm talking about the community activists, some of the pastors, some of the politicians, and the black media, because it's your story of success that they don't want communicated to the black community because they thrive on talking about blacks are victims and need special treatment. So I want to thank you for all you do and for your leadership, because we need more leaders such as yourself to communicate the story that America really is an exceptional country.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I've heard from a lot of black leaders, actually, since this time, who are very thrilled with what I'm saying. I'm sure there are some that are not, but people are starting to think for themselves, and this is what I really enjoy. Black people, white people, brown people, yellow people, think for yourself. Don't be a puppet.
Celia?
So the Government Accountability Office came out with their year-end fiscal report back in January, and they said that we need to start running surpluses of 1% over the next century just to keep the same debt to GDP ratio we have today. Right. The Senate can't even budget or process a budget in the Senate right now. How do we shift the narrative to start talking about surpluses?
Well, you know, I think we would get surpluses almost immediately if we changed our policies. If we took away a lot of the burdensome regulations, if we dropped the tax rates, you would see money flooding back into this place if we just gave people the kinds of incentives that they used to have. And you look what happened in this country when we didn't have an oppressive government and when we did encourage entrepreneurship. We just skyrocketed. It's all pent up right now, ready to go. Look at all the money that's on Wall Street. That money would be invested immediately if people felt that there wasn't some nefarious government out there trying to figure out how to get their money.
And by the way, the money wouldn't be in the Caymans, which you mentioned in your speech. And also if we would drill.
Yes.
Drilling, natural gas, whether Saudi Arabia.
I mean, you look at North and South Dakota, Montana, you look at all that shale up there.
Oh, it's crazy.
I mean, we could just blow Saudi Arabia off the map economically.
Yeah, I love not being PC. Jeff Lord.
Doctor, I'm taking care of my 93-year-old mom, and so we have a few doctors in our life. One of them left his practice not long ago for something called, I'm learning, called a concierge practice. Another is very concerned about his practice and its continuance and his role in his own practice. Can you talk a little bit about how this Obamacare is affecting doctors in the medical community?
Yes. Well, first of all, recognize that you have to go back and look at this historically. When Medicare, Medicaid first came along, you know, doctors who took care of those patients knew that they weren't going to make any money, but they were okay with it because the insurance companies at that time did have to pay for the ones who did have insurance. And just about every doctor, Dr. Siegel can tell you, had a percentage of their practice that was indigent, and they didn't care. We've always taken care of those patients. But now, because the margins are so narrow, because the insurance companies can do what they want to do, they're not capable of doing that anymore. And, you know, I do think we need some insurance reform also, because when you stop and you think about it, one of the major pillars of our medical system are insurance companies that make money by denying people care. We need to deal with that situation because that's an inherent conflict of interest. And I'm sure if we sit down and put our heads to it, we can figure out a way that they can make an adequate profit and people can still be taken care of. But remember, when we go to the HSA situation, the insurance companies will have a very different role because they will just be doing bridge insurance, and we also will have a way of taking care of catastrophic insurance.
All right, we're going to take a break. We'll come back more with our studio audience and Dr. Carson on the special edition of Hannity.